So let's get started. For anybody that didn't hear when I said it a couple minutes ago, if you're just signing on, let me know what you want to get out of the class. Just type it into the chat so that I make sure that I cover it. If you have questions along the way, please do the same, and I'm happy to address them. If you need help afterwards when you're doing a CMA, I'm also happy to do my best to help you through that. So I want to start out with a couple questions, and you can type your answers into the to the chat. Who do we do CMAs for? So who are you looking to do these CMAs for? Who do we do CMAs for, and who can we do CMAs for? Yep, so I see those answers coming into the chat, and that's right. We do CMAs for buyers when they're about to purchase a property. We're about to put an offer in. We do CMAs for sellers so they know what the price of their house approximate listing price would be. We can do CMAs for prospecting and we can send them to past clients to stay in touch with past clients too. So we can use them a lot of different ways. So what's one of the most important factors when considering preparing a CMA? And really, what's one of the most important factors in real estate? Location, 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 right? So when we're preparing our CMA, are we going to compare a property in Queen Village in Philadelphia to a property in on the main line? No, we're going to compare like neighborhoods. We're going to compare a property in Queen Village to a property in Queen Village. We're going to compare a property in the Lower Merion School District to another property in the Lower Merion School District. So we want to really be focused on that location. So the other part of that is it doesn't take the place of knowing your inventory. So you want to make sure that you're out there seeing the properties and seeing the differences and seeing the condition in person. So that's a really important piece of all this is that, you know, if I'm doing a CMA for a listing that I have coming up, I'm going to be previewing all of the properties that I possibly can in that area. And most of them I've already seen, even if they're pending or settled, because I try and keep up on all that inventory on a regular basis. So I'm going to hop in now, and we're going to go into the MLS, and we're just going to start preparing that CMA. And I will watch the chat. If you have any questions along the way, we can do that. So the first thing that I do, and I'm going to take you back to my home screen here so that you know where I am. Hang on here. Okay, so if we want to prepare a CMA for, I'm gonna pick a random address, okay? And I'm gonna use 530 Queen Street for now, and that is a property in Queen Village. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to that public records section. So I went into search, and I'm going to go into public records. And then I'm gonna type in 530 Queen. And I know that that's in 19147, so we're just going to type that in. And I'm going to take a close look at the property itself. And that property is 15 by 46 is the lot size, which is usually correct in Philadelphia. The square footage of the building, of the interior, is 1746 per public records. That's not always correct, so keep that in mind, that you do have to make sure that when you're at the property that it seems like it's that square footage. Maybe ask the seller if they think it's that square footage. And you know, if you're doing this for a buyer, it's the same thing. You just want to make sure that that square footage is in the ballpark. Then I'm going to look at the history of the property. First of all, it's telling me right here that it is on the Philadelphia Register of Historic Places. So that's good information to know. And then I'm going to look at the different, so we know that this property was rented. And it's very helpful to have recent photos of the property because it gives me an idea of what the property looks like on the inside. So I'm looking at condition, I'm looking at finishes, and then I'm looking at anything that is going to affect the value of a property. So some of those things could be, you know, are the bathrooms finished? Is the kitchen finished? Are they newer? Or are they older? Is it on a main street where there's a bus line, or is it on a quiet street? And what school catchment it's in. So depending on if it's in the Meredith catchment, or if it's in a different catchment, or if it's in a, you know, one of the most desired catchments, that can drive the price as well. Now it looks like this doesn't have a roof deck, but it looks like it has the housing for it. And I'm getting an overall sense of what it looks like. And then I am going to go in, and the next thing that I do after I have an understanding of the property itself, I'm also noting that it has 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. Then what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm going to look for properties that are similar, and I'm going to get an understanding of the block. So the first thing that I do is I go to the block and I'm going to enter 500 to 600 Queen Street. And I'm going to take a look at everything that is active, coming soon, pending, closed. And then afterwards, I'm also going to go back and look at any similar properties that might be expired or withdrawn. So I'm going to look here at the whole block. And here, just so that you know, I'm going back 180 days. If I don't find any inventory, I might change that and go back 365 days. However, our market is so different and changing so much that 180 days, as long as I have inventory, that's really as far back as I'm going at this point. And then I'm going to look at the inventory on the block and what's happening on the block. So we have 542 Queen. That's the same side of the street. So in this case, you know, I know the neighborhood well, I know the location well. The odd numbers are on the same side of the street, and the even numbers are on the same side of the street, right? So, and I'm looking at, okay, well, this one's 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Square footage is a bit higher. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at this property went under agreement, and it looks like it was only on the market for 3 days. And then I'm going through, and here's another one. Now this one we're getting more similar in square footage. And this one as well, more similar in square footage. Okay, and then at the same time, I also want to be conscious of my days on market. I want to be looking at the original price, and then when properties close, we're actually looking at what the sold price is. So this property actually closed on 10/28, and it closed for $670,000. And then I can also go down here and see if there's any seller assist that was, you know, seller concessions that were in there, which I'm not seeing any, right? So I'm going to check those properties. And I'm going to probably check this one too. And this one's a lot larger, so I probably won't add that one to my to my cart yet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click down here on the cart button, and then I'm going to create a new cart. I'm just going to call it Apple. And then I'm going to do Apple, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so I'm creating a new cart. and I'm going to add those to my cart. I always click save. I think they do it automatically, but I still click save. And then what I'm going to do is I have those in my cart, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a search for a radius search. And here I'm going to start with a small radius. And then if I don't find enough inventory, I might go a little more. So I'll start with that small radius, and I'm going to type in 530 Queen. Again, I'm looking at active, pending, active under contract, closed, and I probably don't need to see 2 bedrooms in this case because it's a 4-bedroom, maybe 3. So I'm probably going to just put in 3+ to make that inventory, oops, a little bit smaller there. And you don't want to do that. And then I'm going to take a look at how the nearby inventory compares. And then I'm going to go through each of these property and see how it compares in condition to the one that I was looking at. So does this one compare in any way? Not really. The condition's very different. So I'm going to move away from that one. I'm not even going to add it. This one, much larger in square footage, nearly double the size. So I'm not going to include that one either. That one we already looked at, it was on the block. This one's substantially smaller. I might include that temporarily, or I might leave it out. That one we already have in our cart. Now this one, we're getting closer to the square footage. And I'm looking at the lot size of the property. My subject property is 15 by 46. This is 16.75 by 40. I'm going to probably add this one to my cart. That one we already looked at. That one we already looked at. Okay, so this one, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Okay, we're looking at a 4-bedroom with the subject property. Square footage is similar though. So I am probably going to also add this one to my cart. This one, similar in square footage. It's a 4-bedroom, 2 bath. I like that. That's the same that what we're looking at. This property is a little wider and a little shorter. I'm going to add it. I'm going to be looking at the condition and comparing that. This one I might keep in for a little while now. This house is a newer style home, so I'm not really going to weigh as heavily on this. I'll probably leave it out of my cart. When you look, these houses were built much later than the property that the subject property that's on the historic register. This one here is substantially larger in square foot. I'm also going to be in the city. I'm going to be watching and taking out any properties that have parking, because the subject property doesn't have parking. So I'm not going to compare properties with parking to that one. Okay, so I don't see where this has parking. Probably add this one to my cart. And I'm just going to go to that cart and go to my Apple, and I'm going to add it and save. Now I'm going to continue to keep going. Do I have any questions in the chat? I can't. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm actually responding to one right now, but Jennifer Nelson said, I'm not familiar with carts in the MLS. Can you explain why you use this feature? But if you want to explain, that might be better.
Yeah, so what I do is so you see this button right here that says carts. What the cart is I'm basically dumping everything into that cart, because that's where I save everything to go back to. So I'm creating, I looked at everything on the block, and now I'm looking at a radius, and then, you know, I'm going to keep looking at all those and I can keep dumping into the cart, and then I can go back to the cart when I actually want to create my CMA. The cart is a feature that I use all the time. So when I want to like save up properties for people, or I'm doing searches in different places, or I'm doing, I put everything into the cart and then I can send them the whole cart. So a couple things to point out in this, right, is that I'm going to weigh more heavily on the properties when I'm actually pricing or making a pricing recommendation to a buyer or a seller on properties that are, this one is not in the Meredith School District catchment, so I'm going to weigh more heavily on properties that are not. So if I have a property on Catherine that is, and a property on Queen that isn't, I'm going to weigh more heavily on the property that's on Queen. I'm also going to look at, well, is a property, Queen Street happens to be a property that doesn't get a ton of through traffic. So if it's a property like Christian that gets, you know, traffic both ways, I'm going to weigh less heavily on that and more heavily on a property that's on a smaller street. In the suburbs, you're going to watch out for things like, does the property back up to train tracks? And if it does, then you're only going to really comp it to properties that back up to train tracks. So even in that case, if you have to go further back to find comps, you really need to find some comps that have some similar location situations. Any other questions on that so far? So if I didn't have enough comps, I can go back in to my criteria and I can keep on going further out to have more comps, right?
Deidre, we have a question. Can you take things out of the cart later?
Yes. Yes, you can. So when you go into the cart and you go to prepare your CMA, you can click and discard the ones that you don't want. So here, if I want more comps to look at, I just got myself more comps. You can see I have 79 matches down there. Now, I'm starting to kind of get a feel for the price point of this property, and it's probably not going to be below 500,000. So in this case, I might go 500,000 plus, which is going to take me down to 62 to look at, as opposed to as opposed to the 70 some that I was looking at. And then I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to continue to add them to my cart. So I'm going to go into the cart now. And when I do that, I have the 8 properties that I selected. And then I do my CMAs in different ways. So sometimes I might just shoot my client all of these properties to look at. And other times I might actually put it into a CMA form. And to do that, I'm going to tag all, or you can tag none, or you can go through and tag the ones that you want. And then I'm going to prepare my, I went back to actions now, and it gives me the options of what I wanted to do. I can email them, or I can do my CMA. And when I do that, I'm going to then go through the process. And you can elect what pages you want. And I encourage you to read all of these, right? Before you send them, and see what applies. And then you can X out and not include any of these. You don't have to include them all, or you can include them all. So if I'm doing this for a buyer, I'm definitely not including the effect of overpricing and the benefits of using a realtor, because they're already using a realtor and they're not pricing their home. So depending on who my audience is, depends on what pages I include. And I always like the map. I think that's an important piece. And then you are going to 530 Queen. If I can't get it, I'll go back and I'll get the public records ID. And then you can decide what information you're going to put in here, right? And then you're going to have your contact information here. You're going to have to set all that up in your profile. And then here I can decide which comparable properties that I want to include. My map. I rarely put in a sheet that recommends the pricing. That's something that we talk about when we're there, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side, but I'll show you that it's available. And then I finish it. And then you have the option here to save, to view it, or to email it. I'm always going to view it before I email it. And when I do that, I usually end up going back and saying, oh, that doesn't apply, that page doesn't apply, or, you know, I don't want the value there like that, and I delete those pages. While this is generating, are there any other questions in the chat? Okay.
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so then here is my CMA. And here are the properties that I'm going to review or send to them or talk over with them. And it gives it to them in the same format, meaning that you have the subject property and then the properties next to it so they can easily compare. And then you can decide which pages you want to include. And like maybe on this one, like where the square footage is, I would probably go back and take this out because something that's 2,700 square feet, we're really not going to be comparing it to something that's 1,700 square feet. But it can provide a lot of information depending on what you want to include.
Deidre, we have a question. Is there a certain number of homes you try to compare, like on average?
So not really. I mean, sometimes I'll be starting with a stack of like 30 some. However, I'm going to narrow that down for the client to maybe 10 at the max. I really don't want to overwhelm them. Like they don't have to look at 30 homes to get a feel for the price. I'm going to narrow it down to the best 10. And sometimes in an area you're going to have to search harder for comps, right? So notice my map right here, it's really tight because there are comps. But if there are no comps in an area, you might have to go a little bit further out than just right there. And what you want to then watch is, you know, not necessarily here, but, you know, well, here too. Yeah, I'm not comparing a property that's north of Christian to a property that's south of Washington. Okay, so if you notice, there are no properties south of Washington. If I'm doing a property south of Washington, then I'm not comparing it to a property that's north of Washington. And the same thing if you're doing comps for something in the suburbs, like you want to stay in a similar setting, so you're not going to cross major highways, you're not going to cross school districts and that kind of thing. Questions?
You guys can feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions if you have them.
And I'll stop the share here and
Deirdre, I have a question.
yeah.
You mentioned bus routes. How does that affect a property? I've never heard that, so I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, so when I'm pricing, for instance, if you have a house on South Marshall Street, which is a little street off the beaten path that no traffic really goes down, it's very different than a property, say on Lombard Street, that's a bus route and that's heavily trafficked. So it does make a huge difference what street you're on when it comes to pricing like that in the city. And even in the suburbs. So in the suburbs, your pricing is very different if you're on, I'm just going to use like Radnor Wayne, for example, but if you're on like King of Prussia Road, it's going to be much different than if you were nestled into a neighborhood that isn't a busy road.
I put in an offer. My buyers put something under agreement out in Delaware County.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a multiple bid situation. They won. We came in at listing with a $5,000 seller assist. I just was informed over the weekend that it did not appraise anywhere near the price. So I'm trying to figure out how to backtrack, and the listing agent's new, and we're trying to compare properties to go back to the appraiser with.
Yeah, so what I would say for that is, first of all, I always recommend attending appraisers if you're appraisals if you're on the listing site and if you have any inkling that there could be an appraisal issue. I mean, appraisal issues are going to be common in this market too when people are overbidding and upbidding properties, because we're looking at yesterday's comps and we're looking at today's values and they're increasing, and appraisers are weighing most heavily on yesterday's, what sold yesterday, right? Not what's coming up tomorrow. So my best advice for that would be to try and partner with the mortgage person, the lender, and the listing agent and get some comps together. And maybe those comps are things that sold off market. If there are things that you can find in the MLS that the appraiser didn't see, because it is kind of hard to get an appraiser to change the value. How much is it off?
We put it under agreement at 339. The appraisal came back at 315.
Okay, so I mean that is kind of a big amount. So I might try to find some off-market properties that maybe sold that weren't in the MLS, and then maybe try to substantiate even some others that were in the MLS as comps. But if you have some off-market properties, an appraiser might go back and adjust for that. But it isn't uncommon for things to appraise, and I think then it comes down to, are the buyer and seller going to negotiate on that? Can you go to another lender and have another appraisal done? Can you get the appraiser to change it?
We don't think the appraiser even came out to the house. The listing agent has no record of an appointment or anything.
Yeah, so I would say maybe the bank would be agreeable to ordering another appraisal, or I would say that, yeah, maybe you want to, the buyer wants to revisit that in some different ways.
How do you get off the market places that sold? How do you do that?
You go through the public records in the MLS. So I would look at every property on that block and see if anything sold. Like it happens a lot in the city with condos, if they sold off market or whatever, and you look at everything in that building and find them.
Great advice. Thank you.
My pleasure. Good luck. Does anyone have any other questions?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Deidre. We really appreciate your time. If you wouldn't mind just dropping your email in the chat so people can follow up with you if they have questions later. Then in addition, this will be posted to our YouTube page. And once Tech Week is complete, we will send out an email to everyone who attended with all of the recordings from Tech Week. So thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much, Deidre.
Have a great day. Thank you.